Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at how to set up and program our ignition system details as well as our ignition coil dwell within our Link G5 and G4X systems. It's very important that we have the ignition system type selected correctly so Link understands how many coils it's trying to control and in what specific orientation, whether it's wasted spark or direct fire. That's going to be whether we fire the coils once per cycle or twice per cycle, as well as our ignition coil dwell, which is going to be characterizing the individual coils that we're actually working with. So different coils, so say we're dealing with something like a Honda K series coil, or we're dealing with a Denso Prius coil, or we're dealing with a LS, let's say LS2 base coil. They all will have different coil dwell because the actual coils internally are made different. So the dwell table is important to be able to characterize which coils we're using. Same kind of idea as when we were programming our ejector data, looking at something like our latency dead time values that is characterizing the response of the injector. The coil dwell is going to be how we actually characterize the charging characteristics of the coils we're dealing with. So we want to make sure we're programming all this correctly. I'm going to go through the ignition main setup here real quick, and then we're going to go through our coil dwell table here, how to set this up, understanding what coil dwell actually represents in just kind of a basic level, and then how to determine what values actually work. I'm going to provide some of the more common coils. I have plug and play data that we can plug into the coil dwell control table so we can get started. We don't have to dig through data sheets and try to find the information. And then I'm also going to show you an Excel spreadsheet calculator that can determine what your actual duty cycle is for the ignition coils in terms of the dwell that you're programming. You don't want to have too much duty cycle, essentially overdriving the coil, cause it to overheat and fail prematurely. So we want to keep an eye on how much dwell we actually have populated, because there is going to be something that works well for the coil that you're dealing with. But then if you go too much, it'll overheat it, cause it to fail. Too little causes not enough spark energy. All right, let's jump in here and talk about setting up our ignition system in the programming. It's actually really easy. If we go here into our basics page and we go here to ignition main, our ignition mode right now is set to off. So it doesn't understand what kind of ignition system has been fitted to my engine. Let's go in here and take a look at ignition mode. We have an option in our drop-down list: distributor twin spark, waste spark direct spark, rotary leading wasted, rotary leading direct. Let's go through these different options so we understand this. If we're looking here at our distributor option, this would be if your engine is fitted with a distributor. This is common on something like a Honda BDH series engine. They have a single distributor, and that's going to be how the system works. And that's essentially telling the Link that there's one coil that's going to be used for charging and discharging, giving the spark delivered to each cylinder. A twin distributor is a little bit unique. This is found on just a handful of engines. One engine that comes to mind is a 1UZ engine, and depending on what generation 1UZ you're talking about, it will be fitted with a twin distributor. Wasted spark and direct spark. So this would be not for a rotary engine. We see that's listed right here. This would be for your typical inline or V8 piston engine. Wasted spark is if we're firing the coils in the ignition system twice per cycle. Direct spark is if we're firing the coils once per cycle. So you have to understand what you're doing and how you're controlling things. The general rule of thumb here is that if you have both a cam trigger and a crank trigger input coming into the Link, you can fire your injectors in a sequential orientation. So you're firing injectors once per cycle, and you're timing them around the number one cylinder's top dead center position, and all the other cylinders then can be timed from that. Sequential is what you choose for your fuel injection. In this case, you would choose direct spark for your option for your ignition system. So that'd be if you have a coil per cylinder and you have both a cam and crank input to the Link, you can fire in direct spark, and you can also fire your ignition system in sequential. If you don't have a cam sync, so you don't have a cam reference but you have a crank trigger, you would have to choose wasted spark, even if you have a coil per cylinder. That allows the coils to be fired twice per cycle, and that's what you have to choose. Now you can also have wasted spark if you have a cam sync and a crank trigger, so you have both. You could choose wasted spark if you have an ignition system, let's say inline 4-cylinder engine you have two actual coils, and one coil handles the spark delivery for, let's say, cylinders 1 and 4, and the other would handle spark delivery for cylinders 2 and 3. That is an example of a wasted spark ignition. So it really depends on the engine that you're tuning and, let's say, the OEM configuration for an ignition system. If you're dealing with aftermarket and you're setting everything up on your own, if you have a cam sync, you definitely want to choose direct spark and have a coil per cylinder. Now on a rotary engine, there's a rotary leading wasted and leading direct. Leading wasted spark is the way that Mazda has set up the engines from the factory in terms of the wiring. Leading direct means you have both a leading and trailing coil, and they're going to be direct fire, meaning you're on a 2-rotor engine. You'll have 4 ignition outputs from the link controlling all 4 coils. That is the most ideal way to control things on a rotary engine.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.